"You people don't belong in places like this." That's the first thing I heard when I walked into the diner that day. I was on my lunch break, just looking for a quick bite. It was one of those old-school diners, the kind with leather booths and a long counter where you could watch the cooks. I'd been there a few times before, but I didn't come often. The food was okay, and it wasn't far from my job. I saw her right away. A young black woman, dressed nicely, jeans, a neat sweater, hair tied back. She was standing at the counter, holding a menu. Her hands were shaking just a little. "Excuse me?" she said, her voice steady but soft, like she didn't really believe what she'd just heard. The man behind the counter, big guy, late 50s, with a stained apron and a permanent scowl, didn't even look up from the register. I said, "We don't serve people like you here. Maybe try the burger joint down the street." The whole place went silent. You could hear the hum of the old fridge in the corner. I froze in my spot near the door. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A few other customers were looking around, but no one said anything. Not even me. I wanted to. I should have, but I didn't. The woman didn't move. She just stood there, clutching the menu. "I didn't do anything wrong. I just want to order lunch." The guy finally looked up, and the look he gave her, I'll never forget it. Pure disgust. Like she was trash he couldn't wait to throw out. "You think I'm joking?" he barked, loud enough for the whole diner to hear. "Get out, or I'll call the cops." The woman's face crumpled, but she didn't cry. She just set the menu down on the counter, her hands trembling so bad it almost fell off. Then she turned and walked out. I felt sick. I wanted to run after her, to apologize, to do something. But I didn't. I just stood there, frozen, like a coward. The guy behind the counter muttered something under his breath, then went back to ringing up orders like nothing had happened. The air in the diner was thick, uncomfortable. Nobody looked at each other. And then, about 10 minutes later, Karma walked in. It wasn't some big dramatic scene, just a quiet, middle-aged man in a suit, holding a clipboard. I didn't think much of it at first, figured he was just another customer. But then he walked straight to the counter and asked for the owner. "That's me," the guy said, puffing out his chest like he was proud of it. The man in the suit didn't waste time. He pulled out a badge and said he was from the health department. Apparently someone had called in a tip about some serious violations. The owner tried to argue, but the inspector wasn't having it. He started pointing out issues right there on the spot: mold under the counter, expired meat in the fridge, grease traps that hadn't been cleaned in who knows how long. "You're shutting me down for this?" the owner yelled, his face turning red. The inspector didn't even blink. "Until these violations are fixed, your business is closed effective immediately. If you have a problem with it, take it up with the city." I almost laughed out loud. The guy behind the counter, so full of hate just minutes ago, looked like a deflated balloon. He tried to argue some more, but it was useless. The inspector handed him a notice, taped it to the front door, and left. As I walked out of the diner, I spotted the woman sitting on a bench across the street. She wasn't crying. She just looked tired. Like this wasn't the first time something like this had happened to her. I wanted to say something to her, to tell her what had just gone down. But I didn't. I figured she didn't need me to swoop in and play hero. She already had justice on her side. That day stuck with me. I'll never forget the look on her face or the sound of the owner's voice when he thought he could get away with treating someone like that. I didn't speak up when I should have, but I learned a lesson I won't forget. Karma's real, and sometimes it works faster than you think. As I walked back to my car, I kept glancing over at the woman. Part of me felt like I owed her something, an apology maybe, for not stepping in when she needed someone to have her back. But another part of me knew that whatever I said wouldn't change what had happened in that diner. I started the engine and sat there for a moment, thinking. I hated myself for staying quiet. Sure, I didn't humiliate her, but I didn't defend her either. I was just there, and that felt almost as bad. As I was about to pull out, I noticed the woman stand up and start walking down the street. She wasn't in a hurry. She moved slowly, with her head high, like she wasn't going to let what happened keep her down. And that's when I made up my mind. I pulled up next to her, rolled down the window and said, "Hey, excuse me." She stopped and turned, her face cautious. I couldn't blame her for being wary. "I was in the diner," I said quickly, trying to sound less awkward than I felt. "I saw what happened. I'm sorry. That was messed up. He had no right to treat you like that." She stared at me for a moment. then gave a small nod. "Thanks," she said quietly. "I know it's not much," I added, fumbling for the right words. "But he got shut down. Health inspector came in right after you left. They closed the place on the spot." Her eyebrows raised slightly, and for the first time, I saw a hint of a smile. "Really? Really," I said, feeling a little lighter. It was like karma showed up right on time. She shook her head, a soft chuckle escaping her lips. "Well, good. Maybe that'll teach him." We stood there for a moment, the weight of the earlier scene still hanging in the air. "Can I give you a ride somewhere?" I asked hesitantly. "It's the least I can do." She hesitated, then shook her head. "Thanks, but I'm good. I just needed to clear my head." I nodded. "All right. Take care of yourself." "You too," she said, turning to walk away. But before she left, she looked back over her shoulder. "And thanks for telling me. That means something." As I drove away, I couldn't stop thinking about her. About the dignity she held on to, even after being treated so horribly. About how she didn't let someone's hatred break her. That night, I couldn't sleep. The scene kept replaying in my head: the silence of the diner, the humiliation on her face, the anger in the owner's voice. I thought about all the times I'd seen or heard things like that and brushed them off because they didn't involve me directly. The next day, I decided to do something about it. I left a review online about what I witnessed at that diner, describing the owner's behavior and encouraging others not to support a place that treated people like that. The post blew up. Within hours, dozens of people had shared similar stories about the owner's racist and disrespectful attitude. The comments were full of support for the woman, even though none of us knew her name. By the end of the week, the diner's reputation was in shambles. The community rallied together, making it clear that there was no place for that kind of behavior. The owner issued some half-hearted apology online, but it didn't matter. His business was done for good, and that woman? I never saw her again, but I like to think she found out what happened. I hope she knows how much her strength that day inspired me and so many others. Sometimes, the world feels like a cruel, unfair place, but every now and then, you get to see justice served. And when that happens, it gives you hope that maybe, just maybe, things can get better. A few weeks later, I was sitting at home scrolling through local news on my phone when a headline caught my eye. "Diner shut down after reports of racist incident spark outrage." I clicked on it immediately. The article described the exact scene I'd witnessed, down to the words the owner had spat at the woman. Apparently, someone had recorded part of the incident on their phone and shared it online. The video went viral, and the backlash was swift. It wasn't just the health department violations that took him down, it was the public outrage. People flooded his social media pages, calling him out for his behavior. Former employees even came forward, sharing stories of how toxic the work environment had been. What struck me most was that people weren't just angry, they were mobilized. A local group organized a community meeting to talk about racial bias in businesses, using the diner incident as an example of what needed to change. I decided to attend. The meeting was held at a local community center. When I walked in, the room was packed. People of all backgrounds were there: business owners, activists, students, parents, and sitting near the front was her. The woman from the diner. I felt a jolt of surprise, followed by a flood of emotions. She wasn't just sitting quietly this time, she was speaking, her voice steady and strong as she described what happened that day. "I've dealt with things like this my whole life," she said, "but I'm tired of staying quiet. I'm tired of feeling like I just have to accept it and move on. What happened at that diner wasn't just about me, it's about a pattern we see all the time, and it has to stop." The room erupted into applause. I found myself clapping harder than I expected, feeling a strange mix of pride and guilt. She was brave in a way I hadn't been. After the meeting, I walked up to her. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't know if you remember me, but I was in the diner that day." She looked at me for a moment, then nodded. "I remember. I just wanted to say I'm sorry," I said, "for not speaking up, for not doing more." Her expression softened. "You don't have to apologize," she said. "You told me what happened afterward, and that meant a lot, more than you know." I nodded, feeling a small weight lift off my chest. "You were amazing up there," I said, gesturing to the podium. "Really. What you said, it needed to be heard." She smiled, and this time, It was a real smile. Thanks. I just hope it makes a difference. It already has, I said. We ended up talking for a while after that. Her name was Monica, and she worked as a teacher at a nearby school. She told me how hard it had been to relive that day over and over as the video made the rounds online, but she also said it was worth it if it led to change. As we parted ways, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't had before. Standing up for what's right isn't always easy. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, even scary. But staying silent in the face of injustice? That's worse. The diner incident became a turning point for our community. Businesses started hosting diversity training sessions. People began calling out discriminatory behavior whenever they saw it, instead of looking the other way. And me? I made a promise to myself that day. Next time I see someone being treated unfairly, I won't just stand there. I'll speak up, because silence helps no one. And sometimes, all it takes is one voice to make a difference. Karma might handle the rest, but the first step is ours to take. Months passed, and though the diner was long gone, its impact on the community remained. Monica became a recognizable face at local events and community meetings. Her courage sparked conversations that had been avoided for too long. One day, I was at a coffee shop when I saw her again, this time surrounded by a group of teenagers. She was leading what looked like a small workshop, and I overheard bits of what she was saying. You have the power to stand up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I couldn't help but smile. She was using her experience to empower others. Later, as the workshop wrapped up and the teens scattered, I approached her. "Hey, Monica," I said, a little hesitant. She turned and smiled. "Oh, hey, long time no see. I didn't know you were running workshops now," I said. "It's something new," she replied. After everything that happened, I realized there's so much work to do, especially with the next generation. I want them to grow up knowing they don't have to accept the kind of treatment I did that day. "That's amazing," I said genuinely. "You're really making a difference." She shrugged but smiled. "It's a team effort. A lot of people have stepped up since then. You included, right? I saw your post about the diner." I felt my cheeks heat up. "Oh, that. I wanted people to know what kind of person he was." "Well, it mattered," she said firmly. "You mattered. Don't downplay that." Her words stuck with me. I hadn't done much, not compared to her. But maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe it was about doing what you can, where you are. Before I left, I asked Monica if she ever thought about opening her own restaurant or cafe. "You have this way of bringing people together," I said. "I think you'd be amazing at it." She laughed. "You're not the first person to say that. Maybe someday, when I have the time and resources. Well, when you do, let me know. I'll be your first customer." We both laughed, but there was a warmth in her eyes that told me she was already considering it. A few months later, I saw the announcement online. Monica was hosting a fundraiser to open a cafe that would serve as a safe, welcoming space for everyone, regardless of race, gender, or background. The name of the cafe? Karma's Kitchen. I didn't hesitate to donate. On the day it opened, the line wrapped around the block. People from all over the community came out to support her. When I finally got to the counter, Monica was there, smiling like she had all the light in the world behind her. "You made it," she said. "Of course," I replied. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." The food was incredible, but it wasn't just about that. It was the atmosphere, the people, the sense of belonging that filled every corner of the space. Monica had taken something ugly and turned it into something beautiful. She'd shown everyone that even the worst moments can lead to something better if you don't let them break you. As I sat there, sipping my coffee, I realized something. Karma wasn't just about punishment. Sometimes, it was about the good that comes when people decide to do better. And Monica? She was living proof of that.